Hello, everyone. Tonight, we are standing at the edge of a forgotten world where the moonlight filters through ancient branches, casting long, crooked shadows over the forest floor. The air hums with the chirr of unseen insects, and somewhere out there, something massive and silent watches. The flightless terror bird stands still as a statue, its sharp gaze fixed on you, its head higher than any person, its body cloaked in dark, ragged feathers that ripple slightly in the breeze. The forest seems to hold its breath as if even the trees know better than to provoke it. And here you are, stumbling right into its domain. You probably won't survive. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. And drop a comment with your location and the local time. I'm always curious who's staying up late with me. Now turn off the lights. Maybe turn on the fan for some soothing noise, and let's get started tonight. You shuffle along a trail barely visible under the moss and fallen leaves, the ground soft with centuries of decay. The scent of damp earth fills your nose, and somewhere close water drips steadily like a leaky faucet in a cavern. The terror bird stands beneath a tangle of tree limbs, unmoving, as though carved from night itself. You can feel the weight of its gaze even though it hasn't made a sound. There's something deeply unsettling about a predator that doesn't bother with the usual theatrics. No hissing, no lunging, no circling its prey. Just quiet confidence. The beak alone could shatter bone. Imagine a blacksmith's hammer crossed with a scythe, and you're close. And those legs, thick as young tree trunks, are built less for speed and more for breaking anything that dares come near. Historians still debate whether these birds were truly loners or if they roamed in small, loose bands. But tonight, it's just you and this silent sentinel. You shift your weight on the damp soil and a root cracks underfoot. The bird tilts its head slightly, not in alarm, but as if measuring you. Assessing your worth. You feel about as significant as a snack in a vending machine. Insects buzz past your ear, their tiny wings catching the faint moonlight. Somewhere above, an owl gives a half-hearted hoot, and you're reminded that even apex predators like owls steer clear of these giants. Fun fact, some ancient terror birds grew over 3 meters tall. Yes, taller than your average basketball player, and weighed as much as a small bear. Yet, unlike modern birds, these giants had wings that resembled broken spears, useless for flight, but perfect for display for balance, and maybe for swatting away the occasional nuisance. You take another cautious step, your boot sinking slightly into a patch of mud. The terror bird doesn't move, but the forest around you seems to contract as though the trees themselves want to pull back from the standoff. Your heartbeat is loud in your ears, but you can't help noticing the strange beauty of the bird's plumage, dark and tattered, like an old war banner with faint streaks of rust red that catch the moonlight in a way that makes you think of dried blood. Sorry, was that too much? Don't worry, you probably won't see it coming anyway. They say these birds evolved after the age of dinosaurs ended in a world where mammals were trying to take over. But in places like this, terror birds made sure everyone remembered that not all the old nightmares were gone. And here's a curious detail for your next trivia night. Their closest living relatives are not eagles or hawks, but the rather unimpressive Sariyama of South America. Imagine being descended from a giant terror bird and deciding to spend your days kicking lizards. Nature has a sense of humor. A breeze stirs the leaves and the terror bird's feathers shift, rustling softly like dry paper. The sound is almost soothing, almost. The creature finally takes a step, the ground shuddering faintly beneath its weight. It steps not towards you but past you, as though it has decided you're not worth the effort. The message is clear. This bird doesn't run from danger, and it doesn't need to run to be dangerous. You let out a breath you didn't know you were holding, the cool night air filling your lungs. The terror bird moves off into the deeper shadows, its form merging with the dark undergrowth until you can't tell where bird ends and forest begins. The trail ahead is yours again, but you hesitate. The silence feels heavy, and you wonder how many others once stood where you stand now, caught between awe and terror. And just as you think the moment is over, a single loud crack echoes through the forest, some branch snapping far off where the terror bird has gone. You freeze, waiting for a follow-up sound, but none comes. The night settles back into its rhythm of dripping water and buzzing insects, and you're left with the knowledge that in this ancient world, there are creatures that refuse to play by your rules. The forest closes in around you as you move forward, the memory of that silent encounter clinging to your thoughts like damp moss. The air seems thicker now, heavy with anticipation, as if the trees themselves remember the terror bird's stare. You don't have to imagine what it feels like to be prey. Your ancestors knew that sensation all too well. They were drawn to this land of tangled roots and whispering leaves, hopeful for game and shelter, and instead, they found those unblinking eyes waiting for them. Picture it. A small band of early hunters, spears gripped tight in sweaty hands, creeping through the undergrowth. They're not looking for trouble, they're looking for dinner. But as they step into a clearing, the terror bird is already there. Not running, not retreating, just standing as if it owns the place. Which honestly, it does. Historians still debate whether terror birds were truly the undisputed rulers of their domain or if other large predators kept them in check. But to those first humans, that debate didn't matter. What mattered was the chilling certainty that this bird wouldn't flee from them. Instead, it stood its ground. And if they pushed their luck, it would attack not with the frenzy of a cornered animal, but with the deliberate crushing precision of something that knew it didn't need speed to win. The hunters tried shouting, waving torches, even hurling stones. The bird didn't flinch. It simply shifted its stance, that massive head tilted ever so slightly, watching, judging, waiting. You can almost hear their whispered arguments. It's just a bird. We can take it. That's no bird. That's death on legs. There's a strange detail I love about terror birds. Their eye sockets were large and forward-facing, giving them impressive binocular vision. This wasn't some lumbering brute. This was a creature that could size up distance and movement with chilling accuracy. Like that one friend who never misses a dartboard bullseye at the bar, except replace the darts with your ribcage. A breeze picks up, stirring the leaves at your feet, and you find yourself glancing over your shoulder, half expecting that stare to be aimed at you again. You remind yourself that this is just a story, but isn't it funny how stories have a way of making the dark feel darker? Somewhere above, a parrot squawks loud and out of place, as if annoyed that you're disturbing the night's peace. Fun fact, parrots have existed for tens of millions of years, and some species share these forests with terror birds. I like to imagine the parrots gossiping about the terror bird's latest showdown. Did you see it? Didn't even blink. Back in the clearing, the hunters decide to press on. Maybe it's hunger. Maybe it's pride. Maybe it's the desperate gamble that comes from knowing they can't go back empty-handed. They advance, spears raised. The terror bird steps forward just one step, but it's enough. The ground beneath its talons sinks slightly, and the nearest hunter freezes, realizing too late that this creature is all muscle and menace. One swipe of that massive beak, and the first spear is splintered like dry kindling. The hunter staggers back, eyes wide, as the terror bird lets out a deep, guttural croak. Nothing like a songbird's call. More like a drumbeat felt in your bones. The remaining hunters break and run. Their courage shattered, their spears forgotten in the dirt. The terror bird doesn't chase. It doesn't need to. Its message is clear. No one pushes it from its ground. And as you stand there imagining that ancient standoff, you can't help but admire the stubborn, terrifying dignity of a creature that refused to run. You wonder what it must have felt like for those hunters, their bravado stripped away, their place in the food chain abruptly rearranged. The forest feels quieter now, the kind of quiet that comes after a storm or after a predator has reasserted its rule. You notice a patch of disturbed earth where the terror bird once stood, the imprint of its massive foot, like a monument to its defiance. You reach down, tracing the outline with your fingers, feeling the slight indentation left behind by claws the size of carving knives. Historians still debate whether early humans learned from these encounters, whether they began to paint these birds onto cave walls as warnings, or if the terror bird became part of their myths. Some scholars argue that stories of giant, unyielding beasts in human folklore, think of the unflinching guardians or monstrous sentinels, can be traced back to creatures like this. Others say that's giving terror birds too much credit. But as you stand here with the hair on your arm still raised, you know which side of that argument you believe. The breeze shifts again, bringing with it the rich, earthy scent of the forest. And as you turn to leave the clearing, you realize you've been holding your breath. You let it out slowly, trying to shake the image of that stare, the stare that froze hunters, and if you're honest, froze you too. You move deeper into the forest, your boots brushing aside ferns that spring back up behind you, erasing your path as if the land itself wants no part of your journey. The air grows cooler, the canopy thickening overhead, until only faint silver strands of moonlight reach the ground. And then, as if summoned by your thoughts, you see it again, just ahead, framed between two leaning trees. The terror bird. But this time you're close enough to appreciate what truly made it the nightmare of its age, that beak. The beak catches your eye first, because it reflects the moonlight in a dull, menacing curve. It's not just long, it's thick, ridged, and hooked at the end, like a scythe forged by a giant. The surface looks worn in places as if it's splintered wood polished by years of violence. You pause, and in that moment you remember a detail from a fossil you once saw in a museum. The terror bird's beak could deliver crushing blows strong enough to break bones with a single strike. Imagine a blacksmith's hammer on a neck that moves faster than your reflexes. And here it is, inches from where you stand. Historians still debate whether the terror bird killed with swift strikes or whether it relied on repeated battering, but either way, there's no denying the lethal elegance of that weapon. You can't help but think of modern cassowaries with their dagger-like claws, birds today that hint at the terror their ancestors once inspired. But where the cassowary runs or kicks, the terror bird simply crushed. The creature shifts its weight, the ground beneath it sinking slightly with the force of those massive legs. You take an involuntary step back and your foot lands in something soft. You glance down and realize it's the scattered remains of some unlucky creature, bones splintered and hollowed, as if a giant nutcracker had worked them over. You swallow hard and glance back at the bird, expecting it to charge or cry out, but it only watches, its head tilting in that unnerving, calculating way. The silence between you stretches, and somewhere off to your right, a frog croaks loud and ridiculous in the stillness. Just your luck facing down a prehistoric nightmare, and a frog decides to offer color commentary. Fun fact, some frogs native to these ancient forests could inflate their bodies to appear larger. A tactic that worked on smaller threats but would have earned only a bemused glance from a terror bird. You study the beak again, noticing how its upper portion overlaps the lower, forming a natural blade. It looks chipped in one spot, as if from some long-ago battle. The terror bird's ancestors fought in a world still recovering from the dinosaur extinction, a place where mammals were rising but hadn't yet claimed dominance. These birds evolved to fill that gap, to be the terror the mammals hadn't anticipated. And oh, did they succeed. The moon slips behind a cloud, plunging you into near-total darkness. For a moment, you hear nothing but your own breathing, and then a soft, rhythmic thump as the bird begins to move. Not fast, not nervous, just deliberate. You tense, but it strides past you so close you can hear the rasp of its feathers and smell the faint musk of its body, earthy like dry grass and old wood. Historians still debate whether these birds had any natural predators at all once grown. Some argue that packs of saber-toothed cats or dire wolves might have dared challenge them, but most agree that few creatures would willingly pick a fight with a fully grown terror bird. It's a bit like challenging a wrecking ball to a duel. The bird disappears into the trees again, leaving behind only the memory of its silent confidence. You exhale slowly, letting the tension drain from your shoulders, though your heart still thuds in your chest like a drum at a festival. You glance down at the broken bones by your feet and think about how many creatures met their end under that beak. And just because the night isn't done messing with you, a branch snaps somewhere behind you sharp and sudden. You spin around your heart in your throat but see nothing. Just trees, shadows, and the memory of a predator who needed no chase, no roar, no display of speed. All it needed was that beak. You press on, though every part of you wants to turn back. The forest feels denser now, the branches clawing at your sleeves like the desperate hands of forgotten ghosts. Your boots sink slightly into the soft, loamy earth with each step, and you wonder how anything could move swiftly through this tangle of roots and vines. And that's when the realization settles over you like a damp cloak. For the terror bird, speed was irrelevant. It's easy to imagine a creature of that size tearing through the undergrowth, legs pumping like pistons, a blur of feathers and fury. But the terror bird didn't earn its name by running. It earned it by standing its ground, by making a mockery of the idea that survival required flight. As you tread carefully along a game trail worn smooth by generations of animals, you picture the terror bird waiting, always waiting for danger to come to it. Historians still debate whether this refusal to run was a matter of necessity or design. Was the terror bird's heavy frame simply ill-suited for sustained speed? Or was it such a confident predator that it never had to retreat? The fossil record offers tantalizing clues. Those thick, dense leg bones built not for sprinting, but for delivering bone-crushing kicks or anchoring the bird like a living fortress. You pause at a clearing where the moonlight has managed to break through, casting a pale spotlight on the ground. There, imprinted in the soft earth, is a single footprint. It's enormous, easily twice the size of your boot, and the claws at the tip of each toe have carved deep grooves into the mud. You kneel, tracing the outline with your fingers, and feel the chill of ancient power in that silent mark. Off to your left, you hear the distant grunt of some nocturnal mammal. Maybe a giant sloth, maybe something smaller. But whatever it is, you can almost sense its caution, as though even now, long after the terror birds have vanished, their legend keeps the night's creatures wary. And here's a curious fact to chew on while you try not to imagine that beak coming down on your head. Some terror bird species had legs so powerful that a single step could leave prints in ground that hardened like rock over millennia. In fact, paleontologists have found fossilized tracks where the impressions are so deep, they speculate the bird might have been leaping or stomping during a hunt. You can picture it, can't you? A predator so confident it didn't need speed, it needed only to be faster than your reaction. A breeze stirs the canopy above, and for a moment, the moon emerges, fully bathing the forest floor in silver. You spot a fallen log split cleanly in two. At first, you think it's lightning damage, but as you get closer, you see the telltale indentations of beak strikes along the splintered wood. You shiver, imagining that force turned on something flesh and bone. Historians still debate whether these birds hunted alone or coordinated with others of their kind. Some suggest that if terror birds had ever learned teamwork, they might have ruled their ecosystems unchallenged. Others point out that the fossil evidence leans toward solitary lifestyles, apex predators that didn't need help to dominate. But then again, the forest keeps its secrets well, doesn't it? You move on, careful not to disturb the footprint, as though to do so would invite the spirit of the bird to return. Your mind drifts for a moment to modern ostriches, their comically panicked sprints across savannas when threatened. Imagine how different the world might look if ostriches had inherited even a fraction of the terror bird's attitude. I bet zoos would need much stronger fences. The air grows cooler as the night deepens, and the forest hums with unseen life. Crickets sing, a nightjar calls somewhere in the distance, and the occasional rustle in the undergrowth keeps you on edge. But through it all, the idea persists: speed meant nothing to this predator. It was built for something else: strength, patience, precision. You reach the edge of a shallow ravine, the ground falling away beneath you into a gash filled with shadows and mist. Across the gap, illuminated by moonlight, you think you see it again, the silhouette of the terror bird, perched like a statue at the edge of the trees. It doesn't move. It doesn't need to. The world moves around it, and that's enough. The forest seems to draw a breath and hold it as you stand at the edge of that shallow ravine, watching the silhouette across the gap. The terror bird stands motionless, its outline sharp against the backdrop of trees, tangled like a giant's web. And now, with nothing between you but empty space and mist, you can finally take in the details of its strange, menacing plumage. Its feathers aren't sleek or graceful like a hawk's. No, they're ragged and broken-looking like old spears abandoned after battle. Long quills jut out at odd angles along its neck and back, giving it a silhouette that almost seems to bristle even when it's perfectly still. The feathers catch the moonlight not with the shimmer of polished armor but with the dull glow of something battered and scarred. Historians still debate whether those jagged feathers served a practical purpose, perhaps to make the bird look larger or to help with balance when delivering a blow. Some suggest the plumage was simply a leftover relic, useless but too costly to lose through evolution. And, of course, a few romantics like to argue that maybe those feathers played a role in mating displays, because apparently, even prehistoric monsters needed to impress their dates. The terror bird shifts slightly, and a loose feather drifts from its back, spiraling down into the ravine like a dark leaf. You watch it fall mesmerized until it disappears into the mist below. The bird doesn't notice, or more likely, it doesn't care. After all, what's one feather when you've got a reputation that keeps entire forests quiet at night? There's something almost tragic about the state of its plumage. You might expect a predator at the top of its food chain to be sleek and polished, but this bird wears its feathers like a warrior wears old scars. Each broken quill a story, each torn edge a memory of a battle won or a storm weathered. You edge along the ravine, careful where you place your feet. The ground is soft here, the rain from days past having turned the soil to a thick, dark muck. And suddenly, your boot sinks deeper than expected. You stumble forward and glance down expecting mud and find instead a tangle of ancient feathers half buried in the earth. They're massive up close, each one thicker than your finger, their edges frayed and worn. You crouch, brushing the dirt aside, and for a moment you feel as though you're disturbing a relic that should have been left to rest. Odd fact for you, some modern birds like vultures have feathers that look similarly ragged not because they're damaged, but because it helps with thermoregulation or silent flight. Of course, for the terror bird, silence wasn't the point. It didn't need to sneak up on anything. It was the storm rolling in, not the lightning strike. The moon slips behind a cloud again, plunging everything into darkness so complete you can't even see your own hands. For a moment, the forest feels like a memory, as if you've stepped back into an age where this bird's kind ruled the land without question. You can almost hear the crack of beak against bone, the rush of air as massive wings useless for flight, but still powerful flare and warning. Historians still debate whether terror birds used those stubby wings in combat. Some argue they might have helped the bird pivot or balance during an attack. Others think the wings were purely vestigial evolutionary leftovers with no purpose beyond display. But standing here in the dark, imagining that shape moving towards you, it's hard not to see those broken feathers as part of its arsenal intimidation given form. The cloud cover thins, and moonlight floods back in pale and cold. The silhouette on the far side of the ravine is gone, vanished, as silently as it appeared. Your breath catches and you scan the shadows, half expecting it to reappear right beside you. But no, the terror bird doesn't need to chase you. It has left its mark. The image of those ragged feathers, that motionless defiance, will follow you long after you leave this place. You rise slowly, wiping your hands on your pants, the damp earth clinging stubbornly to your fingers. The forest hums to life again. Crickets, frogs, the soft rustle of leaves, and you realize that for now, at least the night belongs to you once more. But you can't shake the feeling that somewhere out there in the deeper dark, a pair of unblinking eyes still watches. The forest path turns uneven as you push deeper, your boots sinking now and then into patches where water has pooled after ancient rains. The air smells of moss and wet stone, a cool, earthy scent that clings to your nostrils. And all around you, hidden beneath layers of leaflets, litter, and thyme, you begin to spot them tracks. Massive three-toed prints pressed deep into what was once mud and is now hardened almost to stone. Each step seems to have shaped the land itself, as though the terror bird walked not just through the forest but upon the bones of the world. You crouch beside one of the prints, brushing away debris. The edges are sharp. Despite the years, the deep grooves left by the claws unmistakable. You measure it with your hand, your fingers barely span the width of one toe. A print like this isn't just a sign of passing. It's a mark of dominion, a reminder that this bird shaped not only its prey, but the very ground beneath its feet. Historians still debate whether these impressions were left during a chase, a hunt, or simply as the bird moved through its territory. Some argue that the depth of certain fossilized tracks suggests bursts of speed, while others insist the prints reflect a heavy, deliberate gait, one that forced the earth to remember. Either way, these tracks aren't mere footprints. They're scars. And here's a curious, off-topic fact for you while you stare into the past. Modern elephants leave similarly deep prints that can last for years in the right conditions. In some places, old elephant trails harden into paths followed by generations of animals. It makes you wonder, could terror bird tracks have guided creatures long after the bird itself had passed? You move along the path following the line of prints. The ground rises gently, and the prints become less distinct as the soil grows rockier. But every now and then you spot a partial heel here, a deep claw mark. They're proof that this ancient predator carved its route across the landscape like an artist chiseling into stone. The forest here feels different. The undergrowth thins, the trees spreading wider apart, as if they too stepped back, giving space to this giant. You can almost imagine smaller creatures veering off, giving the terror bird a wide berth rather than risk crossing its path. You come across a patch of ground where the prints form a tight cluster, as if the bird paused. Maybe it was watching. Maybe it was listening. Maybe it was deciding whether to crush or to spare whatever had crossed its domain. Historians still debate whether terror birds were ambush predators, or if they preferred to confront prey head-on. The truth probably lies somewhere in between, a creature that waited until the moment was right and then struck with the force of a falling boulder. The moonlight catches on something at the edge of the cluster. You step closer and find the bleached remnants of ancient bone, half-buried, cracked, and worn by time. A rib, maybe. A leg bone. Hard to tell. But it's splintered at one end in a way that makes you think of that massive beak coming down again and again until the fight was over. A gust of wind stirs the canopy and leaves rain down around you, a soft patter like distant applause. The world feels vast and empty here, as if the terror bird's presence still echoes, keeping even the boldest creatures at bay. You press on the prints, leading you to a rise where the trees thin further, revealing a view of the valley beyond. From here you can see how the land rolls and dips, shaped by time and by the creatures who once claimed it. The terror bird's domain wasn't just the forest, it was everything it could see, everything its feet could touch, everything its beak could crush. You stand there for a moment, listening to the night. A frog croaks from somewhere down below, the sound oddly defiant. And in that instant, you feel a strange kinship with all the creatures who lived in the shadow of this ancient predator. The terror bird didn't just hunt them. It reshaped their world with every step. You descend from the rise, the terrain shifting beneath your boots as the forest gives way to open plains. The trees become sparse, scattered like ancient sentries guarding the edge of the world. The air sharpens here, clean cold, carrying the scent of distant salt and wind-blown grass. You pause, taking it in. This is the kind of place where the terror bird thrived, far from the tangled shelter of the woods. Out here, it had no need for cover. Out here, it ruled by presence alone. The land stretches endlessly before you, waves of grass rippling under the breeze, the horizon fading into a haze of moonlight and shadow. Somewhere in that vastness you sense sit the spirit of the terror bird, bold and unyielding. This was its domain, claimed not through speed or stealth but through sheer defiance. Historians still debate whether terror birds preferred open plains to forested terrain. Some argue that their size and strength made them better suited for these windswept spaces, where they could see threats coming and stand their ground. Others believe they used the edges of forests for ambush, blending into the gloom until the right moment came. As you stand here, it's hard not to imagine the bird striding across this land, daring anything to challenge it. A gust of wind rushes past, flattening the grass in rippling patterns, and for a moment you think you see the ghost of the bird in the movement, a shadow gliding across the land without needing wings. You shake the thought away, but the image lingers. You set off again, boots crunching over the dry ground. The soil here is firm, scarred in places where ancient hooves, claws, and paws once tore at it. You spot the faint outlines of old tracks, perhaps prey that fled or rivals that dared encroach. And always alongside them or cutting across them, the deep, purposeful prints of the terror bird. No panic, no haste, just steady, unrelenting steps. An odd fact drifts through your mind. Something you once read in a dusty book. In certain parts of the world, there are ancient trails so well worn that they've become permanent features of the landscape, followed by animals and people for thousands of years. Could the terror bird's paths have been like that, etched into the land, remembered by those who came after? Long after the bird itself was gone, the plains stretch on, and you begin to appreciate how the terror bird's refusal to run made sense here. Where would it go? There's nowhere to hide, no forest wall to melt into. Here it was, stand your ground or be seen as weak. And weakness wasn't in the terror bird's vocabulary. Up ahead, a rocky outcrop rises from the grass like the spine of some ancient beast. You approach, drawn by curiosity as much as caution. As you near, you see scratch marks on the stone, deep grooves where massive claws once raked the surface. Whether in battle, or as a display, or perhaps simply to sharpen its weapons, the terror bird left its mark even here. Historians still debate whether these claw marks were deliberate signals, a way of marking territory, or just the byproduct of an aggressive, restless creature. You run your fingers along the grooves, feeling the roughness, imagining the strength it took to carve them. The wind rises again, tugging at your sleeves, whispering through the grass. You close your eyes for a moment and listen, letting the sound wash over you like a memory. You can almost hear the thud of heavy steps, the creak of grass bending under massive feet, the soft rattle of broken feathers in the breeze. You open your eyes and find the plains empty once more, save for the moonlight and the sighing wind. But you know as sure as you know your own heartbeat that this place once belonged to something that didn't run, didn't hide, and didn't bow to any force but its own. The plains stretch on, but tonight the moon rides high and bright, turning the grass silver and casting long shadows that ripple with the breeze. You follow the contours of the land, drawn to a low rise where scattered boulders form natural shelters. And there, just beyond the rocks, you see it, the unmistakable silhouette of the terror bird, its head raised, watching. But it's not watching you. Your breath catches as your eyes adjust to the light, and you realize what holds its gaze. Just beyond the boulders, a saber-toothed cat prowls at the edge of the clearing, its massive fangs gleaming pale in the moonlight. The two predators face each other, statues in a standoff that could have played out tens of thousands of years ago. The cat's tail lashes low and tense. The bird stands unmoving, feathers ruffling gently in the breeze like a battle-worn standard. Historians still debate whether terror birds and saber-toothed cats ever clashed in earnest, or whether their territories rarely overlapped enough for direct conflict. But standing here, watching this silent confrontation, you can't help but feel the weight of possibility. Two masters of their domains meeting in the moonlight, neither willing to yield. The cat takes a slow step forward, shoulders rolling with coiled strength. The terror bird lowers its head slightly, not in submission but in readiness. You can almost hear the blood pounding in the cat's ears, the steady drum of the bird's heartbeat, as both calculate the risk of action. And here's a curious detail to occupy your anxious mind. The saber-toothed cat's impressive teeth were both its greatest weapon and its greatest weakness. A single miscalculation, a bite delivered too soon or at the wrong angle, could snap those delicate fangs. Maybe that's why the cat hesitates now, gauging whether this opponent is worth the gamble. The bird shifts its weight talons, digging into the ground for purchase. It utters a low guttural croak, not loud, not theatrical, just enough to send a ripple through the night. The cat freezes ears, flat, its muscles tight as bowstrings. For a moment, neither moves, locked in a tableau of ancient tension. Historians still debate whether such standoffs ended in violence, or if both predators usually chose to walk away, conserving strength for surer victories. The fossil record gives no easy answers. No skeletons intertwined in battle, no scars on bones that definitively tell the tale. And maybe that's fitting. Maybe the true story of such moments was written only in the fear and respect of those who witnessed them. The wind picks up, carrying with it the scent of dry grass and distant rain. The cat snarls low, the sound barely more than a whisper, then steps back, muscles rippling beneath its fur. The terror bird watches, unblinking, as the cat turns, slinking into the shadows, its pride intact, its fangs unbroken. The bird stands a moment longer, then resumes its silent vigil, as if the encounter never happened. You let out a breath you hadn't realized you were holding, your heart still racing from the tension of a fight that never came. You move on, giving the boulders in the bird's domain a wide berth. The night feels heavier, now charged with the memory of what you've just seen. And though the two predators parted without bloodshed, you can't shake the feeling that you've witnessed something as fierce and final as any battle. You leave the rise behind the grass, swallowing your path, as the plains roll onward beneath the moon's quiet glow. The breeze tugs gently at your sleeves, cool and steady, and with each step, you feel more certain of one thing. This bird, this ancient force of nature, never needed to run. Not once. Its anatomy, you realize as you walk, was never about speed. The terror bird's legs weren't built like the slender, spring-loaded limbs of a gazelle. No, they were pillars, thick, powerful, braced to hold its bulk steady as the earth itself. Each footfall carried the weight of purpose. The joints locked firm, the tendons coiled to deliver crushing kicks if needed. And those talons curved like sickles, made for gripping, gouging, and anchoring this giant predator to its chosen ground. Historians still debate whether the terror bird's slow, deliberate gait was its natural pace, or simply the way it moved when unchallenged. Fossilized tracks suggest bursts of movement, but nothing like the sustained speed of pursuit predators. Instead, what they left behind tells the story of a creature that relied on timing, on strength, on the terrifying certainty that when danger came, it would be met, not outrun. And here's a curious offbeat fact for you. While you imagine that towering bird standing its ground, certain modern tortoises, despite their glacial pace, have been documented to face down predators with surprising success simply because their armor and stubbornness outweigh their need for speed. It's a reminder that sometimes survival belongs to those who refuse to move. Your boots crunch over pebbles as you follow a dry creek bed, the moonlight glinting off smooth stones worn down by time. You imagine the terror. Birds standing here still and silent, waiting for prey to approach the water. No chase, no panic, just a sudden devastating strike when the moment was right. Up ahead, a line of stones juts from the earth like crooked teeth. You pause, studying them. Deep gouges scar their surfaces as if something had scraped against them again and again. Perhaps the bird's claws, perhaps its prey's last desperate struggle. Either way, the land remembers. Historians still debate whether terror birds had specific hunting strategies beyond brute force, whether they ambushed from concealment at the forest's edge or simply strode into a herd and took what they pleased. The truth may be lost to time, But as you stand here beneath the endless sky, you feel the weight of that history pressing in on you. The night is quiet but not silent. A nightjar calls from somewhere beyond the creek bed, its voice rising and falling like a lullaby for ghosts. The grass whispers as the breeze stirs it, and in that soft rustle you hear the echo of a predator who never ran because it never had to. You move on, stepping carefully through the creek bed and up the far side. The ground is firmer here, the grass shorter, the horizon wide open before you, and though the terror bird is gone, its bones turn to stone, its legend scattered by wind and time. You feel its presence in every step you take. The land remembers, and so do you. The plains level out as you walk, the breeze gentler now, like a soft breath exhaled by the land itself. The grass shivers in the moonlight, and for a while the night seems at peace. But then it comes a sound that ripples through the darkness and freezes you where you stand. A call, low and hollow, rolling across the plains like distant thunder. It's not a roar, not a shriek. It's deeper than that. A sound that seems to vibrate in your bones as if the ground itself has joined in. The call of the terror bird. You don't hear it with your ears alone, you feel it in your chest, in the hairs that rise along your arms, in the tightening of your gut. It's a reminder to everything that walks, crawls, or slithers beneath the stars. The master of this land still holds court. Historians still debate whether terror birds vocalize like this at all. Fossils, of course, don't preserve sound. But some researchers point to their massive skull structures and air cavities that might have amplified deep, resonant calls like those of modern cassowaries or emus. Others argue that the terror bird didn't need sound to command fear, that its silence was threat enough. But standing here under the moon's pale eye, you can't imagine this predator without that bone-shaking voice. The call fades, but its presence lingers. The forest at the plain's edge seems to shrink back from it. The small creatures of the night fall silent. Even the wind holds its breath. You take a slow step forward, boots crunching the dry grass, and the sound of your movement feels loud, too loud in the hush that follows. And here's an odd off-topic fact to break the tension. Certain modern birds like lyrebirds can mimic almost any sound they hear, from chainsaws to camera shutters. Imagine a terror bird with that ability roaming the land, echoing the cries of its prey or the growls of rival predators. It's a ridiculous thought, sure, but one that makes you grin despite the chill in the air. You move toward the rise where you think the call originated, each step careful as though you might disturb the memory of the predator that once stood there. The ground is uneven, studded with rocks and the faint remains of ancient burrows. A place of ambush, maybe, or a favored perch from which the terror bird surveyed its realm. Historians still debate whether these birds claimed specific territories or simply roamed freely, taking what they wanted where they found it. Some evidence Trackway's fossil remains suggest they may have patrolled familiar ranges, returning to favored hunting grounds. Others argue that the world was theirs with no need for boundaries when no creature dared to challenge them. You crest the rise and pause, looking out over the land bathed in moonlight. The plains stretch endlessly, the grass rippling like a silver sea. And though the night is silent again, you know the call lingers, etched into the memory of the land carried on, the wind whispered by the grass. The terror bird didn't just command fear with its beak or claws, it commanded it with its voice, a sound that could silence a forest and remind the world who ruled it. You stand there listening to the echo of that ancient call and feel the weight of time pressing in. The bird is gone, but its voice, oh its voice, still haunts the night. You descend from the rise, your steps slow and deliberate, as though you're afraid of breaking the fragile quiet that has settled over the plains. The echo of that ancient call still hums in your memory like a tune you can't shake. But now, the scene shifts. Ahead, where the land dips toward a dry riverbed, you see the faint glow of firelight flickering against the rocks. And their figures, early humans, your ancestors. They huddle around their small blaze faces, drawn intense eyes, darting toward the darkness beyond the fire's reach. Spears rest close at hand, sharpened stones lashed to sturdy poles. They murmur to one another, their words low and urgent. You can almost hear their thoughts. The terror bird is near. They can feel it just as you can. Historians still debate whether early humans ever truly hunted the terror bird, or whether these confrontations were desperate acts of survival. Some suggest that small bands of hunters might have tried their luck with traps and fire, hoping to bring down a giant for the sake of food and glory. Others argue that humans were more likely to avoid the bird whenever possible, focusing on easier, less deadly prey. But here in this imagined scene, you see the tension, the fear, the resolve of those who dared. The fire crackles, sending up sparks that swirl like fireflies. One of the hunters lifts a burning branch, waving it towards the dark, where they believe the bird waits. And perhaps it does. Perhaps just beyond the edge of the firelight, the terror bird watches, unblinking, unimpressed. It doesn't fear fire, not the way lesser creatures do. It sees the humans' weapons, their flames, their trembling hands, and it stands its ground, as it always has. An odd fact drifts through your thoughts. In some cultures, birds became symbols of gods of death, of war. The terror bird, had it been known to those ancient minds, might well have been worshipped as a god of defiance. Imagine the carvings, the myths, the rituals centered on such a creature. The humans murmur again, debating their next move. They could throw their spears, charge as a group, hope to overwhelm the giant bird with sheer numbers and desperation. But the terror bird doesn't wait for their decision. It steps into the edge of the fire's glow, feathers, ragged eyes, bright and cold. No fear, no hesitation, just that steady, unyielding stare. Historians still debate whether early human tools were ever strong enough to pierce the terror bird's defenses. Stone-tipped spears might have injured it, but to bring it down would have required precision, luck, and a level of coordination our ancestors may not yet have mastered. And yet in moments like this they tried, because sometimes survival means daring the impossible. The terror bird utters that deep, rattling croak again, a sound that silences even the wind. The hunters hesitate, caught between instinct and determination. The fire crackles louder, as if urging them to act, but the bird doesn't attack. It simply turns steps back into the dark and disappears as silently as it came, leaving the humans and you breathless in its wake. You stand beside their fire now, feeling the heat on your face, the tension easing from your shoulders. The night presses close again, but the bird is gone. This time at least. But the memory of its stare will linger with these hunters for the rest of their lives. And perhaps one day they'll tell the story of the night they dared to challenge the terror bird and lived. You linger by the remnants of that ancient fire, the ashes cold now beneath your boots as the night stretches on. The sky above is a quilt of stars, the moon sliding westward, casting long shadows across the land. You follow those shadows as they lead you toward a cliff face that rises suddenly from the plains, an immense wall of stone etched by wind, rain, and time. And there, carved into the rock, you see them markings, symbols, a story left behind by hands long turned to dust. The carvings are simple but powerful. Figures with stick-thin limbs, spears raised high, facing down a massive bird etched with exaggerated claws and that unmistakable hooked beak. The terror bird. Even in stone, the creature's defiance radiates. The humans are many, but the bird is alone, and still it stands unyielding. Historians still debate whether such rock art represents actual events, or whether these images were symbolic legends carved into stone, to warn, to inspire, or to remember. Some argue that early humans recorded their greatest challenges on rock faces to honor the creatures they faced, while others suggest these were cautionary tales meant to keep future generations wary of the dangers that lurked beyond the firelight. You run your fingers along the grooves, feeling the roughness where stone flakes were chipped away by tools made of bone or harder rock. The image of the terror bird is worn in places, smoothed by wind and rain, but its shape endures. The artist chose well. The cliff face catches the dawn light so that each morning as the sun rose, the bird's form would blaze into view as if reborn. And here's a curious off-topic fact in parts of the world. Ancient peoples carved images of animals into rock, not only as art but because they believed doing so could give them power over the creature depicted. Imagine standing here thousands of years ago, chipping the image of the terror bird into the stone in hopes that its spirit would be tamed, or at least appeased. You step back, taking in the full scene. The cliff rises high, the carvings stretching beyond what the firelight of those first artists could have illuminated. Perhaps they worked by moonlight or by flickering torches driven by the need to capture the image of the creature that haunted their lives. Historians still debate whether such carvings were collaborative efforts, entire communities coming together to create these monumental records, or the work of a few skilled individuals chosen for their talent or their bravery. Either way, what remains is a testament to the impact the terror bird had on those who lived in its shadow. A breeze stirs the grass at your feet, and the sound reminds you of whispered prayers. Maybe the artist offered thanks to the spirit of the bird when the carving was done. Maybe they hoped that by honoring it, they would be spared its wrath. You look at the image one last time, the bird forever frozen in defiance, and feel a strange sense of peace. The terror bird may have refused to run, but here at least it stands guard for all time. You leave the cliff behind, the carved terror bird's gaze lingering in your mind as you follow a narrow trail that winds toward the distant cliffs at the edge of the plains. The land here is harsher, rocky, wind-scoured, where the grass thins and the soil gives way to stone. The air is sharper too, filled with the tang of salt and the deep, endless sigh of the sea far below. This is where the terror bird made its last stand. You can almost see it as you climb, the bird alone against the rising wind. Feathers, ragged eyes, bright with that same unshakable defiance that carved its legend into memory. The cliffs offer no cover, no shelter. Just sheer drop-offs and jagged rocks far below where the waves crash in endless fury. But the terror bird does not look for escape. It never did. Historians still debate what led to the final decline of the terror birds. Was it changing climates, dwindling prey, or the slow, relentless spread of humankind? Fossils tell of a dwindling population, scattered remains in places where they once ruled. Some argue they were outcompeted by faster, more adaptable predators. Others believe they simply stood too still as the world changed around them. But tonight you see only the last of its kind, standing proud as the night winds howl. The path narrows, the stones beneath your feet slick with sea spray. You pause at the edge, the world falling away below you in a sheer drop. And there, imagine it, the terror bird framed against the moonlit sky, wings spread wide, though flight was long forgotten. Beak raised as if to challenge the stars themselves. And here's a curious fact. While you catch your breath, the cliffs you stand upon might well have existed in some form for millions of years, shaped by ancient seas and shifting earth. The terror bird's ancestors might have gazed out from these heights long before the creature's the final hour, watching the world below with the same fierce eyes. The wind rises, tugging at your coat, whispering through the broken stones. You see the scene play out in your mind's eye, the terror bird cornered not by predator, but by time itself. The last of its line refusing to retreat, refusing to run even as the world it knew slipped away. Historians still debate whether the final terror birds were hunted to the end or whether they faded quietly into extinction unseen, their strength and defiance unbroken to the last. But here, in this place where the land meets the sea, you feel certain of one thing. The terror bird met its fate as it lived. With courage, with stillness, with the kind of unflinching spirit that leaves a mark long after the body is gone. You stand at the edge a while longer, the waves far below singing their endless song, and then you turn from the cliffs, carrying the weight of that final stand with you as you go. You descend from the cliffs, the wind at your back like a farewell. The land stretches before you wide and quiet, its silvered grasses bending beneath the breeze. The terror bird is gone now. Its body dust its bones scattered or buried deep beneath the soil, but its defiance lingers. You feel it in the hush of the night, in the way the land seems to pause when you pass as if remembering. And it wasn't just the creatures of tooth and claw that carry that memory. No, the terror bird's spirit echoed in the hearts of those early humans who watched, who fled, and who dared to stand their ground. You picture them around their fires, painting their faces with ash, raising their voices in chants that mimicked the bird's low, rattling croak. Not out of mockery, but out of awe. Out of a desire to draw some of that unshakable strength into themselves. Historians still debate how much of early human ritual was inspired by creatures like the terror bird. Some argue that its image shaped the symbols of guardians and warriors in our first myths. Others say we give the bird too much credit, that it was just one more predator to be feared and forgotten. But here, as you walk beneath the stars, you can feel its influence in the bones of the land, in the pulse of ancient stories. You crest a small rise where the grasses part around a ring of stones clearly arranged, not random though weathered by time. At the center lies a shard of bone smoothed by ages of wind and rain. A talon, maybe, or the carved remnant of one left as a token. The ring feels sacred somehow, as though those who built it hoped to harness the bird's spirit to keep its courage close as they face the trials of their world. And here's an odd off-topic fact for you to chew on as you stand there. Some early human societies are believed to have kept talons, feathers, or bones of great predators as charms, tokens of strength, or warnings to rivals. The terror bird would have been a prime candidate for such trophies if you were bold enough to claim one. You kneel beside the stones, fingers brushing the earth, feeling the cold of the rock, the weight of untold years. The wind stirs the grass, and in that sound you almost hear the whisper of old voices chanting to the spirit of the bird, seeking its blessing, its bravery. Historians still debate whether those early rituals, whatever form they took, were meant to honor the terror bird or to protect against it. But maybe it was both. Maybe, like us, they recognize that true strength lies not in the creature itself, but in what it awakens within us, the will to stand firm, to face down the dark, to refuse to run. You rise, leaving the ring behind, and as you walk on the land seems less empty, filled instead with the echoes of those who lived, who fought, who remembered. The terror bird is gone, but its spirit walks beside you. The plains open wide around you, endless beneath the fading moon. The night has grown still, the breeze softening to a gentle sigh that stirs the grasses at your feet. You walk without hurry now, your boots brushing through the silver waves as if the land itself is guiding you toward the final place where the terror bird once stood. You crest a low hill, and there it is, a wide expanse where the grass grows thin, the soil bare in patches as if nothing dares take root where the bird's shadow once fell. The silence here feels different, deeper, as if the world is holding its breath out of respect for what came before. You stand at the edge, looking out, and try to picture it. The giant bird alone on this plain, its head high, its feathers tattered by wind and time, but its spirit unbowed. Historians still debate how long the terror bird's final echoes lingered after its kind was gone. Some say the land forgot quickly, that the world moved on as it always does. Others believe that its legend shaped the fears and dreams of those who followed, long after the last talon left its mark in the dust. But standing here, you feel certain of one thing: the land remembers. Even if we forget, the land remembers. An odd, quiet fact drifts through your thoughts as you listen to the wind. In some parts of the world, certain plants refuse to grow where great beasts once died, as though the memory of that death has seeped into the soil. You wonder if that's what keeps this place so bare, if the terror bird's final stand left a mark deeper than any footprint. You step into the clearing, boots scuffing the dry earth, and for a moment you feel small. Small beneath the sky, small beside the memory of a creature that refused to yield, that chose to stand when others might have fled. The grass whispers around you, and you hear it again, the echo of that low rattling call carried on the breeze, reminding the night that some spirits never truly vanish. Historians still debate whether this bird deserves its fearsome name, whether it was as terrifying as we imagine, or simply a creature trying to survive like any other. But as the dawn's first light bleeds across the horizon, soft and pale, you know it doesn't matter. The terror bird story isn't just about strength or savagery, it's about defiance, about refusing to run even when the world changes, even when the end comes. You take one last look at the empty plain, the sky brightening above it, and feel a quiet peace. The terror bird's shadow is gone, but its spirit walks on in the land, in the stories, in the courage we find when we choose to stand our ground. And so you leave behind the plains where the terror bird once stood, the wind brushing softly against your back like a farewell. The night gives way to dawn, the first warmth of the sun creeping over the horizon, blurring the sharp edges of the land. You walk slower now, each step gentler, as though the world itself has quieted with you. The terror bird's story lingers, not as a tale of violence, but as a memory of fierce defiance, of a creature that refused to run when all else fled. The land remembers, the stones remember, and perhaps now so will you. Stos. The bird's shadow may no longer fall upon these empty places, but its spirit endures in every whisper of the grass, in every sigh of the wind. And as you move on, you carry a piece of that spirit with you, a reminder that sometimes the greatest strength is in the refusal to yield.